Folks, if you told me at 71 years old that my own kid brother would pull the rug right out from under me, I'd have said you were full of baloney. My name's Harold Thompson. I spent my whole life in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place where neighbors still wave from their porches, and everybody knows whose dog keeps digging up flower beds. The house I grew up in sat on Maple Road. Nothing fancy. Just an old white farmhouse with creaky floors, a squeaky screen door, and more memories than you could shake a stick at. Mom and Dad raised 4 kids there. Christmas mornings, backyard barbecues, Sunday dinners. You name it. That house was the heartbeat of our family. When Mom passed, Dad started slowing down. My younger brother Rick stepped in to help with bills, paperwork, and doctor's appointments. Truth be told, I was grateful. Rick's got things handled. I'd tell folks, boy, was I barking up the wrong tree. A few weeks after Dad's funeral, Rick invited me over. He had this strange look on his face. Not sad, not nervous, almost smug. He slid a folder across the kitchen table. Harold, he said, Dad updated his will. I frowned. What do you mean? Rick cleared his throat. The house is mine. I felt like someone punched me square in the gut. For years, Dad always said everything would be split evenly. Now, suddenly Rick owned the entire property. Every last inch of it. I studied the paperwork. The signatures looked real enough, but something felt fishy. Still, I was grieving. Tired. Worn slap out. I didn't have the energy for a legal fight. A few months later, Rick sold the farmhouse to a young couple from Chicago. Just like that. Our family history disappeared with a for sale sign. As I watched strangers carry boxes to the front door, I figured that chapter of my life was finished. Then, one evening, my phone rang. The caller said she'd just bought my childhood home, and she needed to tell me something she found hidden inside the walls. What she said next made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. But the secret hidden inside that old farmhouse wasn't money, and it wasn't treasure. It was something far more dangerous. The woman introduced herself as Sarah. She sounded nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Mr. Thompson, she said, I think I found something that belonged to your father. My heart skipped a beat. She explained that her husband was remodeling a bedroom upstairs when they discovered a loose section of wall. Behind it sat an old metal box. Now, plenty of folks would have figured it contained old coins or family photos. Not this box. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Every single one written by my father. Sarah offered to bring them over. The next morning, she arrived carrying a faded cardboard container. The moment I saw Dad handwriting, my eyes watered. I spent hours reading. Most of the letters were memories he had written for future generations. Stories about growing up during hard times. Stories about Mom. Stories about his kids. Then I found one envelope with my name on it. My hand shook opening it. The letter read, Harold, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. I nearly fell out of my chair. Dad went on to explain that he suspected someone was pressuring him to change his will. He never mentioned names, but he wrote that he feared being manipulated while his health declined. At the bottom was a note. If ownership of the farmhouse ever becomes disputed, look beneath the old workshop floor. I stared at those words for a long time. The workshop, Dad's workshop, still stood behind the house. Sarah had no idea what any of it meant. Neither did I. But one thing became crystal clear. Dad had hidden that letter for a reason. And for the first time since his death, I realized Rick might not have been telling the whole story. That night, I barely slept a wink. Because if Dad left clues behind, what exactly was buried beneath that workshop floor? The next morning, I drove back to property, and what I found beneath the workshop changed everything I thought I knew about my brother. The young couple welcomed me onto the property. Thankfully, they were good people. I explained Dad's letter. Sarah's husband grabbed a crowbar, and together we headed toward the workshop. The building looked exactly the same. Same dusty windows. Same faded workbench. Same smell of sawdust and old memories. For a moment, it felt like Dad might walk through the door carrying a coffee mug. We located the loose floorboards mentioned in the letter. My pulse hammered like a jackrabbit. When we pried them up, we discovered a small wooden chest. The hinges were rusty. The lock had long since broken. Inside sat folders stuffed with paperwork, property records, bank documents, tax statements, and one signed affidavit. As I read it, my stomach dropped. Years earlier, Dad had documented concerns about financial pressure from someone close to him. The affidavit wasn't proof of fraud, but it was enough to raise serious questions. Then I found something even bigger. Copies of an older will. A will showing equal inheritance between Rick and me, exactly as Dad had always promised. I felt sick. Maybe Rick hadn't forged anything. Maybe he had. Either way, Dad clearly wanted someone to know his original wishes. When I got home, I contacted an attorney. After reviewing everything, he said the documents warranted further investigation. That was all I needed to hear. For the first time in months, I felt a little hope. Meanwhile, Rick had no idea any of this was happening. He was busy enjoying the money from the sale, bragging around town, buying himself a shiny new pickup truck, living high on the hog. But karma has a funny way of showing up when people least expect it. And Rick's day of reckoning was closer than he knew. A week later, a witness came forward with information that could destroy Rick's entire story. And she had kept a secret for years. The witness was Dad's former caregiver, Linda. She asked to meet privately. We sat in a quiet diner near the highway. After looking around to make sure nobody was listening, she leaned forward. "Harold," she whispered, "I've carried this burden long enough." My chest tightened. Linda explained that during Dad's final year, Rick controlled nearly every appointment, every visitor, and every piece of paperwork. According to her, Dad often seemed confused whenever legal documents were discussed. Several times he expressed concern about signing papers he didn't fully understand. Linda never witnessed wrongdoing directly, but she said something never sat right with her. Then she handed me a notebook. Inside were detailed notes she kept while caring for Dad. Dates, appointments, conversations, observations. The notebook painted a troubling picture. Nothing definitive, but enough to support further investigation. As evidence accumulated, Rick started hearing rumors around town. Soon he called me. His voice sounded rattled. "What are you doing, Harold?" I answered calmly, looking for the truth. The line went silent. For the first time, my brother sounded scared. That told me more than words ever could. Weeks later, attorneys began reviewing the documents. Experts examined signatures. Witnesses gave statements. The situation was snowballing fast, and Rick's confidence was evaporating faster than a puddle in July. Still, one question haunted me. Why would Dad hide so many clues? Unless he expected someone to need them. And if that was true, perhaps there was still one final piece of evidence waiting to be discovered. Just when the investigation seemed complete, Sarah called again, and this time she found something hidden in the attic that nobody had seen in decades. Sarah's second discovery nearly knocked me off my feet. Tucked inside the attic was an old camcorder case. Inside sat several videotapes. Remember those old things? The kind we'd record birthdays and family reunions on. One tape was labeled, "For my family." I had the footage converted to digital. The next evening I sat in my living room and pressed play. There was Dad, older, thinner, but completely clear-minded. He looked straight into the camera. "If you're watching this, I may not be here anymore." My eyes filled instantly. Dad spent nearly an hour sharing family memories. Then his tone changed. "If questions ever arise about my estate, know this." I leaned closer. "I have always intended for my sons to share the farmhouse equally." The room went silent. Dad repeated it twice. Clearly, directly. There was no misunderstanding, no confusion, no uncertainty. The video didn't automatically overturn legal documents, but revealed Dad's true intentions beyond any doubt. When Rick learned about the recording, he stopped returning calls. Friends said he rarely left home. The walls were closing in. Months later, a settlement was reached. The details remained private, but justice finally prevailed. The farmhouse remained with the young couple, who loved it as much as our family once had. Part of the proceeds was redistributed fairly. More importantly, the truth finally came out. Dad's voice was heard. His wishes were honored. And after all those years, I finally found peace. I still drive past that old house sometimes. The porch swing is gone. The flowers are different, but the memories remain. And every time I pass by, I think about Dad's final lesson. You can fool people for a while, but eventually the truth catches up every single time. If you think this story was unbelievable, wait until you hear what happened when a grandmother discovered the secret her family had hidden for 40 years.